What's up, guys? It's Rob here, and we're heading to the gym once again today. And last night, there was actually a really big storm that hit our area. And so this morning, I woke up, and as I was walking around the neighborhood, I saw a tree removing company. And I was wondering, what are they doing? And I looked over at the house they were next to, and it was my neighbor's house, and a big tree had fallen onto their house and had hit. It was actually kind of like the garage portion of their house. Fortunately, no one was hurt. I saw both the neighbors out there; they were both fine. And it was the garage portion of their house. Next to it was their car, which had also been hit by this tree. And so, car smashed, side of the house, really side of the garage attached to the house, smashed. Um, Big damage. So, this tree company was in there. They were taking out that tree, and they were taking out a couple of other trees too. It looks like my neighbors got a little bit paranoid about falling trees now. So, I mean, there used to be, I think they're taking out maybe like 8 other trees, and these are big oaks and just huge old trees that have been there my whole life. It's kind of sad to see them go, but understandable, right? If tree branches and stuff are going to be falling on your house during a storm, then it makes sense. You want to get some of the trees that are right by your house cleared out. And so it's sad to see them go, but it is probably a lot safer. So that's what's going on. That was just, it was, weird to see that level of destruction to a house, especially, in my neighborhood. It's one thing to see on the news after a big storm, there's a ruined house somewhere, but to actually see it right next door, very easily could have been my house. We've got a lot of big trees too, but it was the neighbors. And, it was making me think that, it so easily could have been a different area of the house that it hit. It could have been an area where someone was sleeping and it could have hit them. And I mean, the thing about a falling tree is it is so powerful when it actually falls. At least trees of this size, these are pretty big. They're lengthy trees, they're thick trees. And I mean, it looks like when this thing fell, it just cut right through the house. I mean, the house is made of wood too, but it's made of these, it's made of wooden beams and stuff that are, a couple inches thick. These trees are, at over a foot, multiple feet probably thick. And they just cut through houses like butter. it was scary to see. And they crush cars too. So, it's kind of scary to think that, just any given night, if there's a big storm, I mean, it wasn't a hurricane, it was just a storm. And those happen all the time. Any given night, a huge tree could come slicing through your house and hit you in bed. And you're just a pile of pulp right after that. It is scary to think. And it's made, something that I have thought in the past during big storms. Sometimes I'll look out the window, usually during a hurricane or something where a big deal has been made about the hurricane coming beforehand, and everyone knows, oh, watch out, there's a big storm coming. Usually, that's what happens before I do this. I'll look out the window during the storm, and I'll see all of these trees swaying back and forth in the wind. Kind of crazy how far trees sway without breaking. But I'll see all of these trees swaying back and forth in the wind, and I'll be a little anxious about it. I'll be looking at them, and I in the past have thought, any one of these could snap and could break and could, potentially hit me, but I'm more worried about the house, right? It's a bigger target than myself. I'm not super worried that a tree is going to hit exactly where I am, but, the house is a pretty big target, and any one of those storms, a tree could hit it, and I would have some anxiety during those storms, just watching the trees sway in the wind and hearing all this thunder. And I would have some anxiety just, watching that and listening to it. And then I thought to myself one time how horrible it must be to be in a war-torn country and to have actual bombs falling around you, and how much more anxiety you must have to be in that situation and to have that be the norm, right? I mean, these storms don't come often. Every now and then, every couple of months, you get a big one where there's all kinds of thunder and the trees are really shaking. But to be in a war-torn country, I was thinking about Ukraine specifically, just, about all the bombs that are falling, and to be living in that kind of a situation for multiple years now that's been going on, and how, I mean, maybe the anxiety passes, but something tells me it probably doesn't. And when you hear those bombs falling, you're probably scared. And, that happens. I don't know how frequently, but it must be rough to live in that kind of a place, in that kind of a circumstance where that's going on. And, that it made me feel a lot less anxious. And it made me feel kind of privileged that I could be anxious about a tree falling, because I mean, it's so natural to hear thunder and lightning and stuff. It really shouldn't be worried about that, but to have bombs falling, to see your city getting destroyed, for years, that must be really brutal. So it was an eye-opening thought that I had, and it put in a weird way, it put my mind at ease a little bit, right? I was less worried about my own situation, just thinking about, what those people must be going through. And I know there are other places like Israel and Palestine that, that kind of stuff is happening too. But Ukraine was just on my mind because that's been going on for, I think, 2 years at this point. I think we're about to hit the 2-year mark, if I'm not, maybe the 3-year mark. So that's been going on for a while, and I was just thinking, man, it must be rough to be someone from that area, and how horrible it is that that's going on. And I just wish that, I wish that some of the people, some of the higher ups that are involved in carrying this out would maybe think about it from that perspective. And for everyone involved in it might think about it from that perspective and realize, this isn't worth it. Let's not do this. It's not a good thing to do. It's horrible for, especially for the kids that are living through it. That's going to probably cause some long-term mental damage to them if they just grow up with all this anxiety, and they're angry that this is happening, and they're fearful about what could happen to them. And not just because of bombs. A lot of bad stuff happens during war, and I'm sure that it causes a lot of mental illness in people after the fact, PTSD, and it's not a pretty situation for anyone. So I just wish that there was some way we could something we could do to stop that. It would be great if people just never started those kinds of conflicts in the first place. And maybe that's easier said than done. I always felt like if I were at the top of any kind of government organization, I would not be starting wars. And maybe I would defend my country if it were attacked. But, I would defend my country if it were attacked, but I would never want to be the aggressor in a situation, right? And maybe that's easier said than done. Obviously, things are more complicated than that. But the world is a complicated place. But I would like to think that we could come to more peaceful solutions than dropping bombs on each other, especially at this stage where we have so much access to information and we have so many resources. We've gone through the Industrial Revolution. We have the capacity to produce a lot of goods and services for people. And, at this point, it's like, what is being fought over? Why is anyone aggressive towards anyone else? We live in a world where there is so much capacity to produce comforts for ourselves. And, we don't need to take from others. We can do the work ourselves. And, it's one thing, some people would probably point out, well, the natural resources are the limiting factor now, and people have to fight over those. And yes, to an extent, that's true. You do need land to grow food on, and you need, resources to produce whatever goods are providing people with comfort. But, at the end of the day, no one should be taking those goods from anyone else, I feel. And it's one thing that it's really horrible for the people that it happens to, but it's another thing that it's just from a logical standpoint, it's really inefficient, because all of these resources that you spend trying to take resources from other people are essentially resources wasted. They're not providing comfort for anyone. They're not making anyone's lives better. I mean, they're, and we're talking about the net effects here, right? Maybe they're making some people's lives better, and I guess that's why they do it, right? To take resources from someone and give them to someone else, it makes the person's life better who got the resources. But it's, when you look at the net effect that has, it's still a net negative, because you had to spend resources to take resources. And if you just spent resources on improving people's lives, then you wouldn't maybe need to take as many resources. And really, I mean, you shouldn't be taking resources. You should, if you really like the resources that people in a different area have, then maybe you should move there and utilize the resources yourself and live in that area instead of, waging a war over resources. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. Once again, it's more complicated than that. I mean, people can get into bad deals and bad situations, and people can be coerced to hand over resources that they don't really want to, even when violence isn't necessarily involved. People get tricked, and then they want to get out of the deal. And, there are causes for conflict, obviously, and sometimes they might even be justified. But I think on the grand scale, if people could come together and kind of reason with one another, then we could avoid a lot of the conflict, and the world overall would be a lot more efficient, because we'd be wasting less on these conflicts and would be hurting fewer people. I mean, it's really kind of a doubly bad hit when you spend resources to hurt someone else, because not only are you wasting resources, not improving your life, you're using resources that then make someone else's life worse. And you're oftentimes, during war, destroying a lot of things, dropping bombs and stuff. You're destroying a lot of the progress that has been made. So then you have to spend even more resources rebuilding the structures that are destroyed. And it's just, your equipment gets destroyed. And it's just this whole thing where sometimes I imagine how much more plentiful everything would be if there had never been any wars. How much more would exist in the world if we'd never wasted any resources fighting, and instead, imagine if all of the militaries that had just been fighting one another and destroying things had just been put to work, building houses and planting trees and then harvesting those trees and using the lumber to construct new structures. I mean, imagine how much more stuff we would have. It would be incredible. So, I mean, that's just one perspective. That's just kind of the logical perspective about why war is a really inefficient thing to do. And sure, sometimes there might be reasons to do it. If someone really insane somehow seizes power, then maybe you do need to stop them. Because, they might be threatening to destroy your country. And maybe you do need to stop them, but you should really focus your efforts on stopping them and not destroying the country that they're controlling, right? I mean, if you just stop a couple of key people, then you could probably avoid a lot of the destruction, and it would be a lot more efficient, just from a logical perspective. Obviously, there's the humanitarian side where you really don't want to be destroying anything or hurting people, and it's causing a lot of damage to people's lives, not physical damage necessarily, but mental damage, societal damage, social damage, and it hurts people. So you want to stop it for that reason too, but it's just a thought that I've always had. Kind of the logical reason not to engage in warfare is just that, imagine if no one had ever done it, how much more stuff we would have if people were just constantly producing and trying to make the world a better place instead of trying to take things from others. So that's my rant for the day. We just parked. I'll see you later.